Welcome back to Lafayette Returns, a historic Rockford podcast released monthly leading up to Lafayette Day at Rockford on Monday, July 28th, 2025. I'm your host, Lisa Landis-Blowers. This month, our special guest is Mackenzie Anderson Sholtz, founder of Dancing Leaf Designs. She combines a unique background in medieval studies from Vassar College and a certificate in fashion design from the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising in San Francisco, with extensive experience in the garment industry and fashion education. Her career includes roles as a designer and educator, as well as impactful volunteer work in museum exhibitions. Her fig leaf pattern line emerged from her museum projects, reflecting her expertise in both historical and theatrical costuming. Mackenzie has extensive experience in theater and period dance, ensuring her patterns are both historically accurate and artistically compelling. Thank you so much, Mackenzie. We are so glad you could sit down with us today.
It's my pleasure, definitely. Love to talk about historic clothing.
I would love to begin by hearing what inspired you to start creating historic clothing patterns.
I would say it would be historic dance. That's something I started right out of college, and there weren't patterns available, so you had to kind of wing it. And luckily, I grew up sewing and working in theater, so winging it was fine because it was important to dress in the right period because I was doing 15th century, 16th century dance because the movement was informed by the styling of the clothing. You know, when I look back at what I've been doing, it's really what's the impulse behind creating historic pattern line, which was to give people the right shapes and the right underwear and the right stays or corsets so that they could move appropriately in period houses or museums, so that they could feel what it felt like to be dressed.
That makes so much sense. I do not sew, Mackenzie. I'm a novice. Can you walk us through your process of researching and designing patterns?
Oh, in some ways, that's really easy. I realize this, having done both theater and now historic patterning. Theater, you're basing what works. Yes, they do use period shapes, but it's mainly to fit a contemporary body. And theater is often based in reality, but clothing is created to create a character. And so that's very different from clothing we wear today. You wear what feels comfortable to you, you are creating a character when you go outside and step outside, but you're not creating a theatrical character. So I just decided day one I would only work with extant garments. That way, when someone said, oh, well, that didn't exist, because I'm coming from an academic background, I can say, yes, there isn't a real original garment from which this pattern was taken. And it just made it that much simpler. And it's also a wonderful thing for museums to have someone who's interested in their collection that can help them involve the community in what they've been collecting, because now they have a pattern that the community can wear. Often there are ties to that community, so half the fun is researching if I know who the people are, who they were married to, who they're related to. I mean, it's kind of gossipy history. And then you have that whole question of, why was this garment saved? Out of all the garments that someone wears, why this one and not that one? There's a lot of sleuthing as well. And some garments come to museums with little or no provenance. Mostly museums collect garments that do have a provenance. So it makes some of that easy. But sleuthing out who the people were can be really a lot of fun. It's a good mystery.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure the sleuthing is part of the fun. Now, with the materials that we have today, is it a challenge to replicate the garments?
Yes. Oddly enough, women in the 18th and 19th century had a broader variety of textiles to choose from. And one of the neat things that someone who was selling textiles in a small town, he'd only buy 6 to 8 yards. So only one woman would have that dress made of that, because you have to be aware, not everybody wants to see the same fabric on your next door neighbor. Wool, particularly, the quality and the lightness of wools that were available just aren't available today. Even some of the very fine silk twill weaves that I see, particularly in the Regency era, nobody makes those. So yes, it is a challenge. I love a good challenge. So sleuthing for fabrics is half the game, particularly when I'm making the first sample. I try to get a textile that's close to the original in the same color, and if I can get a pattern that's similar. And that's the other thing. Sense of scale in the 18th and 19th century is very different from what you can find today. You can find the right print, but often it's too big. So, I mean, there are always compromises. And again, that's some of the things that you take into consideration.
Do you have advice for those of us who are interested in sewing a historical garment? Any advice?
Stay with natural fabric. Don't go into polyesters because they wind up being really hot. They don't react the same when you sew them. So silks and cottons and wools and linens. Linen is a miracle fiber. I wish I'd known about linen 30 years ago. We've tended to shy away from it, but it is an amazing, particularly if you're in the summer. It wicks away the sweat. It has a natural microbial essence to it, so it doesn't smell when you wear it. Particularly, I live in the South, so it's always hot in the summer when these events are going on. It's an amazing fiber. So have fun. Look at original garments. You can go on Pinterest and look at where the museums like MFA, the Met, Philadelphia, of course the V&A, all of those, you can do visual research and see what the colors are, what the detailing is, and that can help inform you what you want to put on your own garment.
Well, some of us are having garments made, or we are attempting to sew our own historic garment for Lafayette's visit. He's not going to get to Lancaster until July 2025, so July of next year.
Oh, you have plenty of time.
Yeah, we do. I hope. So we're going to recreate his dinner and ball here in Lancaster City. I would love to hear more about your research on pattern 210, the Bib Front Dress from the Lafayette Ball. Talk about that.
A friend of mine, Catherine Richardson, was the director of the Camden Archive in Camden, South Carolina. And she had recently gotten a donation of a dress that came with a provenance of having been worn at the Lafayette Ball in Camden on March 9th, 1825. And so I wasted no time. I went up to take a look at it. And it's this beautiful silk twill. It's gossamer silk in a olive gold, which was very, very popular around 1810, 1812. It's what is known as an apron or bib front dress. It pins at the shoulders. Underneath, there are flaps that cover the bosom. It comes apart at the shoulders so that you can step into the garment or put the garment over your head. Originally, it had long sleeves. It has a fairly full circumference, and it's pleated in the back with princess seams in the bodice. So it's put together in two pieces. The bodice is done, and then the skirt is done, and then they're put together at the waist. It had undergone some alterations for when she wore it to the 1825 ball. She just had her seventh child, I think. And so this was the perfect gown because it's easy, it's lightweight, it's comfortable. And she could change that 1810, 1812 waistline, which is a little higher than what we're seeing in 1824, 1825, by putting on a wider waistband belt or ribbon. And the other thing she did was to cut the sleeves and poof them out. The 1820s it starts earlier having poofy sleeves, but they get very poofy in the 20s. And so that's what she did to alter her dress, which I think many women did. Not everyone could afford to go out and have a new dress made or buy the fabric, because in this time period, it's not the labor that's expensive, it's the textile. So the idea of use and reuse is very prominent in American history as well as European history. One of the other dresses that went to a Lafayette ball was made out of about 1770s fabric. and it was remade in an early 1820s style. So while we like to think everybody rushed out and bought something new, honestly, I think most people who attended these balls were wearing their best dress with maybe some additional ribbons and proof. We don't think of adding things or taking away things from our garments to make them look different. But this is an era where a ribbon or a necklace would change a look of a garment. So they were always altering things and adding things. Even Jane Austen talks about that with her characters, taking apart a bonnet and adding new trimming to it to make it look like a brand new bonnet.
I was going to ask if you had any advice as far as accessories for those of us attending the Lancaster Ball. And I'm curious, would there have been any clothing fashion differences in those attending balls here and ladies attending balls in the South where you're from?
If it's hot in the summer, they're wearing the same thing. One of the things that I found delightful, there's a dress in the Shippensburg University Fashion Archives and Museum that's pleated exactly the same way that the dress from Camden is. So there is information going up and down the East Coast, and it's actually going out west. However long it takes a letter to go from the East Coast to wherever a settlement is, it's how fast fashion travels. So I would imagine that they're going to wear short sleeves. They're going to wear probably light cotton sheers over maybe a lightweight silk petticoat or underdress. If you can, I would make your shift out of linen and your stays or corset out of linen because, again, that wicks away perspiration and heat much better than cotton does.
Now, if we want to recreate...
That's a lot of information, I know.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I love it. I love it. We can purchase the pattern that you were telling us about, the Bib Front Dress from the Lafayette Ball, at your website.
Yes.
And you have lots of information there. Talk more about that.
You can look on Etsy under Fig Leaf Patterns, or you can look on my website, which is www.figleafpatterns.com. They both contain information. It really doesn't matter which one you order from. I have an 1825 dress that it is from the Shippensburg University, and I'm thinking it's from that area in Pennsylvania. I'm also coming out with one that is a silk dress that was in the DAR exhibit, Agreeable Tyrant. So those are both going to be mid-1820s dresses. And there's the third one, but I'm not sure I'm going to get that out before your summer event next year.
I would love to hear, do you have a memorable story about your experience recreating historical clothing design? You work with so many museums. Any stories you could share?
Oh, sure. There was one. Again, for the Agreeable Tyrant, I was hired to do scale drawings for their catalog. And one of the garments actually belonged to the curator, Alden O'Brien. She very graciously allowed me to take it home so that I could study it more intently. And at first I just thought, okay, it's an 1810, 1812 red dotted dress, deliciously lightweight cotton. But the more I looked at it, the more I realized that it actually undergone 3 different alterations. It had originally started out as a 1790s gown with 3 panels in the skirt. Now it only has 2 panels in its skirt, and the front had been moved to the back. The back bodice had been lowered. They added a bit more to the front and made it a crossover front with an apron front skirt, which means that the front of the skirt ties underneath the bust. And then added a bias ruffle to the hem and to the cuffs. I think they actually added the cuffs there. So they did that all out of 1 width of textile. So this dress lasted probably 20 years, and it's still in fabulous shape. But I would call up Alden and say, oh, Alden, look, I found the waistband. Oh, Alden, this is what I think is right. She was in on the hunt for the 1790s dress too. So I made the 1790s dress, and then I made the various other iterations of the dress. It's just a fun dress.
Well, I encourage everybody to visit your website. So many patterns there. You are so talented. Figleafpatterns.com. And you do speaking engagements. I understand you are in England for the Jane Austen Festival. You will soon be in Cleveland and later in Williamsburg, Virginia. Can you share more about the Jane Austen Festival?
I actually don't know how long it's been running in England, but it is I think it's a 10-day event in England where there's a promenade that you can do on Saturday. This year, they're opening up 2 days of having vendors available to the general public that you can come in and go shopping for your Regency era whatnots and everything. I'm going with a very dear friend of mine, Danielle Perry, who owns Timely Tresses. So if you're looking for a lovely bonnet to go with your outfit or a toque, or whatever headgear you may need, I would suggest looking at timelytresses.com. She does exquisite millinery work. Then there are lectures and events and plays, and you can play croquet, you can learn how to fence, you can take dancing lessons, you can go to several balls. It's a very full week if you participate in everything. And it's all in the beautiful city of Bath, which I'm looking at the weather. It's going to be at night in the 40s and in the day, low 60s and rainy. All those dresses I was thinking about that have trains to sort of drag along and look elegant, like you see in all the fashion plates, I'm rethinking that because there's nothing worse than a wet dress.
I assume you're going to be working. Will you have plenty of time to play, I hope?
Yes. I'm working the 2 days as a vendor. I'm going to play for a week, and then I'm teaching 2 different classes. I'm teaching a Regency hand sewing class, and then I'm teaching a class on making a fitting muslin of a late 1790s, early 1800s yellow drawstring spencer, which has delicious back details. Yes.
Lovely.
It is.
It's not fair to ask favorite questions, but do you have that one pattern or dress that you just can't live without?
I fall in love with all of them. I mean, that was the hardest part about culling my 85 pounds of patterns to less than 50. It's like, oh my goodness, everybody needs these. They're so wonderful. I would have to say, again, it's a piece from the DAR, and it looked very sad in the box. It had been a very well-loved dress that had been altered. It had its skirts taken off and altered into a spencer. I have never been a ruffly person. This has ruffles around the collar and ruffles down the front. And I thought, if she can do it, I can do it, right? And so I made this dress. And it is something that if I shortened the hem, I could wear out today. It's that stylish and that timeless. And that one is 218. Big Leaf Patterns 218.
Well, thank you so much, Mackenzie. You gave us so much information, so much wisdom as we prepare for Lafayette's visit next year. I wish you safe travels on all of your fall adventures, and we will visit your website, figleafpatterns.com. I am going to attempt to put something together for next year. You've inspired me.
Oh, good. And don't hesitate to email me at figleafpatterns@gmail.com. I'm always happy to answer questions. And that goes whether or not you buy a pattern or not. I think it's important to share what I've been very privileged to have access to with people that don't often get a chance to look in storage in museums. So that's kind of what underlies what I'm doing as a pattern maker, is making history accessible to people.
Thank you so much again, Mackenzie. Mackenzie Anderson Sholtz, founder of Dancing Leaf Designs. For more information on her fig leaf patterns, figleafpatterns.com. Tune in next month for a brand new episode. For more information on Rockford's Lafayette Day, visit historicrockford.org/special-events. For information on what's happening across Lancaster and Western Chester counties, go to Lafayette200pa.org. I'm Lisa Landis Flowers. Thank you so much for listening.